According to Charles Koch Institute, there are currently over 1.5 million individuals in the United States incarcerated in either federal or state prisons. This is a 390% increase from 1978. Paired with the fact that crime rates have been declining since the 1990s, it is apparent that American prisons need to change. Prisons have always been a necessary aspect of any functioning society, but when a country accounts for 5% of the world's population, 20% of the world's incarcerated individuals, the way they handle criminal justice needs reform. While many officials argue that the reason for this mass increase in incarceration is due to the war on drugs and the proliferation of nonviolent offenders in prison, many believe this to be an excuse meant to divert attention from the real problems with our prisons. Some researchers believe it has to do with human bias towards race, class, and gender, as well as the unchecked power of local prosecutors, going so far as to state mass incarceration is not just a huge policy failure, it's a humanity failure. The American government has institutionalized this dehumanizing view of criminals in its civilian population, the very same population that votes on criminal justice policies and decides if convicted persons are innocent or guilty through juries. As stated by Norwegian criminologist Niels Christie, the more unlike oneself the imagined perpetrator of the crime, the harsher the conditions one will agree to impose upon convicted criminals, and the greater range of acts one will agree should be designated as crimes. This quote exemplifies the situation facing America. The population controlling the fate of inmates could not be further disconnected from them. Others claim American society pushed to make prisons more profitable by contracting out collective labor such as unpaid private farmhands, all to satisfy $80 billion mass incarceration industry that's been growing since 1973. Although the causes of such a skewed criminal justice system are debatable, its effects are clear. Over 600,000 men and women are released from prison every year, and according to the American repeat offender rate of 80%, a lot of them will be back soon. Prisoners do not just face problems with overly punitive prosecutors and poor legislation, they face much more human problems. One of the leading causes in a reduction of repeat incarceration, misconduct, and intergenerational cyclical incarceration is better access to visits from non-incarcerated individuals. As prisons are often cut off from the outside world, these visits are some of the only connections to their old life. Many prisoners have friends and family that they want to keep healthy relationships with, but our current prison system makes this basic human right rare. There is an estimated 2.7 million children who have parents in state or federal prisons. 63% are held in a facility over 100 miles away from their family, and only 31% have a visit in the last month. If prisoners cannot maintain their outside relationships, who are they supposed to go to for help when they're freed? The lack of humanity in our prisons are one of the leading causes in its failure to rehabilitate criminals to functioning members of our society. There are many different ways to approach reforming American prisons, but one clinically proven method, known as rehabilitation programming, has aided many inmates on their path to re-entering society. One of the biggest problems for inmates adjusting to life on the outside is trying to get jobs and other housing. The Department of Defense states that over 48,000 legal barriers and bars are held against prisoners that prevent them from securing housing. 74% that are released are still searching for employment 8 months after release. Many are not prepared to enter the civilian life, and prisons do very little to help them. Rehabilitation programs tackle everything from education to workforce development and allow inmates to grow and develop real-world skills that can help them secure jobs and other requirements for living outside of prison. Some mental health courses have been found to reduce prison misconduct by up to 22%, as well as one substance abuse course in California reducing reincarceration by 48%. One country that excels in its treatment of inmates is Norway. According to The Atlantic, recidivism rates are as low as 20%, and incarceration rates are 10 times lower than the US. Scandinavian prisons focus on humanity. They treat their inmates with respect, giving them their own rehabilitative officer known as a contact officer. These contact officers work as both rehabilitators and correctional officers. By doing this, they reduce the amount of punitive actions that lead to stress, fatigue, and depression. This dual role for correctional officers is necessary, as their job often leads to aggression, mental illness, and suicide, especially considering a correctional officer's average lifespan in America is only 59 years. On top of that, they take out many of the overly punitive rules of prisons, allowing their inmates to have cells on par with college dorm rooms, recreation centers with games to keep them entertained, and even access to Skype to contact family members every week. All of this is due to the lack of politicalization over the criminal justice policy. Norway allows its experts in the field, many of them published criminologists, to create policies which actually benefit the criminal justice system. When prisons take the fear and punishment out of inmate sentences and replace it with education and opportunity, prisons will see much greater recidivism margins. Prison reform is not an easy fix, nor will it be quick. Many of its aspects are failures deeply ingrained into our government and society. Yet including more beneficial programs for inmates as well as making it easier for them to maintain healthy relationships with the outside world, it's essential to reducing crime and repeat incarceration. Reforming our prison systems will take a lot of legislation and hard work, but the benefits to our society will be immeasurable.